our boy Batman. People are always taking pot shots at him, whether it's CBR or other outlets.
The true villain of the Degenerate J channel.
Frankly, we're sick of it. We're tired of your crap.
That's right.
And we're taking you down. So tonight, we're taking a look at 5 Marvel villains that could easily defeat Batman. Imagine me as the sarcastic SpongeBob meme.
Yeah, that was a good one. Yeah,
during this whole thing. Yeah. So basically, they go through this, and we're going to read the full story here. We're going to TLDR parts of it. It came out on February 9th, 2020, so we've got a recent article here. And they talk a little bit about how the evildoers of the DC Universe are not generally able to beat Batman, but they're able to mess with him, and provide a challenge to him. And he has lost before. Some people are going to remember that he got his clock completely cleaned by Reverse Flash in the last couple of years in the comics.
It makes sense.
So it's Batman's a character that needs that prep time. I mean, and people say that's an excuse, but that's a core part of this character. Mm-hmm. And so who knows if we're counting that or not, but it seems like this article is not.
No, I would agree.
As we dive into it. Because their first one is Bullseye. Now, I want to hear how you feel about Bullseye, because I usually talk about these just on my own. It'll be interesting to get your thoughts, too, because I really think Bullseye, if Deadshot can't beat him, how can Bullseye?
Well, that was my thinking too. Is like, if you're gonna say, I think this is an interesting article, and I like it because it gives us stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
But if you're going to say,
you're being political here. You're trying to be nice.
I'm being too nice. Too nice. But I'm saying that, like, if you're gonna say easily defeat Batman, this is not. This isn't in that category.
Yeah.
I don't think at all. And if Deadshot has no luck really beating Batman that I know of, then how is Bullseye going to make it happen easily, I guess? And that's what I'm going off of, is the title itself, is that it could easily happen. That doesn't make sense to me. I don't think that fits at all.
Bullseye is one of those characters that I've read bits and pieces of in the Daredevil comics. My issue is that, yes, he has like these incredible like abilities in order to like hit things from a distance. His combat, his acrobatics, they're great. But when you take something like the fact that the greatest known assassin in the world's not able to kill Batman, and then you swap in this guy, it's just hard for me to believe that, I guess, even if he's borderline that for Marvel. But it's hard to believe that he's going to easily take down Batman when Deadshot can't. It's because they're very obviously two sides of the same coin. There's so many characters like that, too, with Marvel and DC that are just the same.
Yeah, and there's a lot of characters that Batman fights like that I guess really... I mean, he has problems, but you're never going to easily beat Batman with a character like that.
No, not like a mortal character.
No.
So the next one we have is Magneto. This is the worst argument, I think, on the list. It's so bad because...
it falls apart quickly.
The problem is, so just to read a little bit of it, I try not to read word for word because, these people wrote this. But essentially they talk about how Batman's arsenal of self-built gadgets and gizmos come in handy. Many of them are obviously based on revolutionary technology, but they go on to say that essentially those gadgets are also mostly metal. So you have things like his gauntlets made of metal, or at least the spikes on the gauntlets are metal most of the time. His batarangs are metal. You have all of this stuff being metal, and so the point is that because Magneto can control metal, he could annihilate Batman with his own stuff. So I guess my issue with this is you can say that the prep time thing is a cop-out. People say that. It's a core tenet of this character. It's a core part of him. So, if you completely remove that, we've talked about this before. Somebody could drop down on Batman and blast him. He doesn't die, generally. He usually puts up a fight.
Right.
But, where he comes in handy, really, is when he studies his opponent and fights them. So I have a hard time believing that Batman, if he knew who Magneto was, would go into a fight with metal.
That's the thing, is you could put Batman really in any situation with someone who has superhuman abilities, and if he has no idea what's happening, I mean, he's going to be at the very least surprised and probably have a hard time, like the article says. But like you said, and I don't really think it's a cop-out because that's his character. If you look at even, I think it was the movie, there was Justice League Doom, maybe? What it was, where
League Doom.
He has plans for the Justice League to take all of them down individually. And I mean, someone gets their hands on those plans in that movie.
And he's able to fight back against the entire Justice League when they're essentially controlled by Joker. In the New 52.
Yep.
and he has the Justice Buster armor for the Justice League. I mean, like you're saying, this is a character who, when he knows a potential threat, even if it's a friend, is prepared to tackle that threat if it arises.
He's always got a doomsday plan for these things. So like you said, I have a hard time believing that he would go in to a fight with Magneto with a metal suit or anything metal on him. And you know what I mean? I don't see that happening.
And I have two other problems with this. One is that in Dark Knight's metal, which is not really a spoiler, but they essentially force Batman to come into contact with these 5 different types of metal, and then it's sort of insinuated that they might just be inside him now, but then it's just dropped. So I don't know if Batman has metal in him that can be messed with now or not. I don't even know how that works. What version of Batman is this character fighting? Are we assuming that he just dropped in and Batman doesn't know him? There's no context provided to what version of Magneto, what version of Batman, what point in the timeline, what's the circumstances. It's just, hey, Magneto versus Batman.
Because I feel like to be on this list of easily defeating Batman, it should be like, regardless of the situation, there's really not a plan or a situation where Batman is going to win.
Right.
Prep time kind of eliminates that a little bit, where it's not like an easy victory by any means with Magneto. So if you look at it from the context of the title and they don't provide any other context, I don't think this fits either.
Well, so, my other problem, too, is that like the winning is not always a physical thing, which is something we'll get to later.
Sure.
There's logical and moral victories as well, and it sort of depends how you count this. The next one we have is Doctor Doom. My problem with this one is that they talk about how he's a super genius, and he is, and how Batman's most deserving foes are the ones who use brains over brawn. But they also, by the way, I like to point this out, English major, I'm going to sound really condescending. They say his most deserving foes are the ones who use brains over brawn, and few individuals.
Oh, kick them while they're down.
So I'm just saying, if you can't even get the grammar right,
you're a monster.
How am I supposed to take you seriously? It makes no sense. It's like CBR, where they said like, killer greater than off. Do you remember that instead of moth? So they talk about Victor Von Doom being a genius. Yes, he is. Batman's fought plenty of geniuses, kicked Lex Luthor's butt several times, and also, pretty much borderline been bested by him too, and then, come back. I mean, there's a lot of Batman victories that are like the villain pushes Batman to almost beating him, and then Batman comes back
based
later.
on intellect. Yeah. Yes, it definitely has happened before.
And the whole thing here is that they're saying like that his magic will beat Batman. Batman's fought magic users before.
Yes.
And in fact, the comics have shown Batman actually understands and can use bits of magic. I mean, again, something like Dark Knight Metal, he was able to actually hide things. I'm trying to explain it explain like you're 5, because I feel like I'm 5 talking about it. Yeah. He was able to like hide objects using magic, inside other objects. Like Batman is well versed in all these things. He understands the power of the world around him, even if he's not a sorcerer.
Right.
So it's like, again, what are the circumstances? Is he just dropping in and fighting him? Batman's beaten magic users before, so if that's your only reasoning, it's not really a good one?
No, because you can't say that he would win because of magic when that's something that Batman's beaten and overcome, I guess,
and
before.
Understands.
Understands. So, like, I don't see how that's like now it's an easy victory for Doctor Doom. I don't see that either. I don't see how that would be like an easy day for Doctor Doom. So I get it, he's smart, but Batman has got plenty of geniuses over on the DC side.
The next one is Moon Knight, who's gotten a lot of crap for being discount Batman. And they go on and say, like, Moon Knight's not a villain, you say? Well, perhaps the godlike vigilante has led a more heroic lifestyle for the better part of his existence. Wow, I can't talk. In Marvel Comics. But if true fans will recall, the character was initially introduced as a villain. So basically, they just say they count him as a villain because he was introduced as one before. The problem with this list, again, is that a lot of these characters have gone back and forth. Doctor Doom spent a lot of time as a good guy. So did Magneto, actually.
Yeah.
So they're selectively interpreting versions of this character. And Moon Knight's been a hero pretty much forever. Like, for a long time, for years.
Yeah, they said at the beginning of his character, he was, and ever since, he's been a good guy.
He's been pretty much a good guy. You've seen some flip-flop a little bit. It's like wrestlers. You have heel turns every once in a while with these characters. But, like, it just doesn't make sense. And so they talk about how he suffers from DID, which is dissociative identity disorder, which doesn't really tie into this at all, but it's worth mentioning, I guess, so that they can link another probably article from them. Oh, they link an article about upcoming Marvel TV shows. So I'm glad they brought up DID to do that.
Well done.
Regardless, so they talk about how basically Moon Knight is an Egyptian archaeological... Well, I mean, he's a mercenary who was at an Egyptian archaeological dig, and then he was resurrected by a god who gave him lunar-powered magical abilities and expertise in martial arts and technology. By the way, I do find we have to suspend disbelief for superheroes. I like the idea. It's like, you will be good at technology. It's like, that's one of the powers
you now know jujitsu. Like,
and you know coding. He's like, oh, I'm going to get all the ladies. No, I like Moon Knight. He's pretty cool. He's got one of the most badass costumes, I think, in comics, actually.
Yeah, it looks unreal.
He's really cool.
Yeah.
And he gets too much flack, but the problem is that they don't actually offer anything for why he could beat Batman. He talks about how like he has spiritual gifts of telepathy and pain resistance. Batman's fought plenty of people that either are pain resistant or even just straight up barely feel pain at all. Bane, he doesn't feel much pain when he's getting hit on Venom.
Yeah.
He's able to find ways around this. And they say that the Caped Crusader might have to accept that he does not have the upper hand this time. But again, they tie it.
Why?
Why? First off, why? And second off, if it's close, how is he easily beating Batman?
That's the whole premise, and that's not happening.
No.
He's a heavyweight boxer, turned Marine, turned mercenary, and he was given some gifts by a vengeful god. I mean, fine, but that doesn't really put him over the top of anyone in DC that I can think of.
No,
You know
it
what I
doesn't.
mean?
And
Like,
you know what? In recent years, Tom King showed us that Batman actually is the UFC champion. I'm not kidding.
What?
That happened. He went in the UFC ring and he beat this abusive douchebag and became like the UFC champion.
What, dude?
Yeah, but like so it's like I don't think he accepted the belt if I'm remembering right, but he beat the UFC champion in the ring. So Batman.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, it's a thing.
Incredible.
Yeah. So it's I don't know, man. I just don't know.
No,
this is the one that I think could beat Batman, just
Yeah.
straight up, and it's an unfair entry. Why don't you go ahead and tackle this? You know even more about him than I do.
Well, this is what I was going to say, I guess, at the beginning of the list, but I didn't want to spoiler, I guess, everyone that was
Thank you
on
for
the
not
list.
spoiling it.
Such a good guy. I was thinking that if you want to have people that would easily defeat Batman, this is probably the tier of character that you would want, I guess, on this list. Would be like Galactus, Eternity, these like giant godlike characters. Yeah, sure, totally. They'd probably destroy Batman. That makes sense. You know what I mean? Or like even to a little bit lesser of an extent, Thor, Hulk. I mean, Batman still maybe has a fight for that. That's a little bit a lower tier than this. But I think it's still interesting. So that's the characters that I would see on this list. I think that's why it's an interesting list, is because it doesn't really fit what I think would make sense.
No, and that's when we get to Eternity now.
Yeah.
And his backstory is interesting because they pretty much picked someone who's like up there, I would say, on the cosmic level in terms of power.
Yes.
Like, it's just nuts.
Yeah, he controls. So he's basically the incarnation of time. Basically, is what he is. So he was from what I understand, he was a character that kind of came in at the beginning of time, and is basically the only thing that he's underneath is the living tribunal. So he's on the same level. Some would say even more powerful than Galactus, and he kind of just bends and controls time a little bit. But that's just kind of his role. So that makes sense that he could beat Batman. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For this one, I'm fine with this. I don't have any problems with Eternity.
No, I don't either. I will say, though, that, like I said before, not every victory is a physical one.
Yes.
Because Eternity also has a personification. He he has an intelligence to him.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that has an intelligence can be reasoned with. And so that's kind of my thing, too, is like, you say he would easily beat Batman. Maybe with, like a snap of the fingers, his power, whatever. Yeah, sure. It's like Darkseid. I know Batman was able to dodge the Omega beams, but like it doesn't mean that just because this character is physically very powerful that Batman couldn't reason with them or talk to them or do anything. You have characters like I'm going to ignore Doomsday